Back in the roaring 20s, there was this one guy, an undisputed king of comedy, a real giant of the silver screen. But right at the peak of his fame, he gets caught up in a scandal so huge, it literally changed Hollywood forever. So today, we're going to talk about Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, and the one party that brought an entire industry to its knees. And that's really the core question here, right? This isn't just some story about a celebrity falling from grace. No, this is about how one single chaotic party put an entire industry on trial. It ended up shaping the very movies that, your grandparents and maybe even your parents grew up watching.
Okay, so to really get how big of a fall this was, you first have to understand just how high he climbed. Before all the drama, Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, he wasn't just a star. The guy was practically an industry all by himself.
Just look at this number for a second. $1 million. Now, let's put that in perspective. This is 1921, okay? The average person was making maybe a couple $1,000 a year. So $1 million, it was basically an imaginary number. But for one guy, it was very, very real.
Yep, that was Arbuckle's contract with Paramount Pictures. It made him the very first $1 million star in history. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. He was the highest paid and probably one of the most powerful actors on the entire planet.
And man, had he earned it. On screen, he was this comedic genius. A big guy, sure, but with this incredible, surprising agility that just made people lose it. Audiences didn't just find him funny, they absolutely adored him. He wasn't just famous, he was truly beloved. But all that laughter was about to come to a dead stop. And this is where it all goes wrong. It all comes down to one weekend, one party in a hotel, and one tragedy that would just spiral out of control and become one of the biggest, most sensational trials of the entire century. Okay, so let's stick to what we know for sure, the things nobody disputes. It's September 1921. Arbuckle throws a party at the St. Francis Hotel. An actress, Virginia Rapp, gets really sick in his suite. And then, just 4 days later, she dies. What exactly happened inside that room? Well, that became the million-dollar question, and it sparked a furious debate that's still talked about today. And the media just exploded. The tabloid press, especially the papers run by William Randolph Hearst, they smelled blood in the water. They didn't bother waiting for facts or evidence. Nope, they just started painting this picture of a depraved Hollywood full of booze and moral rot, and they stuck Arbuckle right in the middle of it as the monster. Almost overnight, his reputation was completely destroyed. So yeah, Arbuckle was eventually going to face a jury in a real courtroom. But honestly, his first and probably most damaging trial was already happening, on the front page of every single newspaper across the country. And get this, he had to go through not one, not two, but 3 exhausting trials for manslaughter. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The second one, same thing, another hung jury. But that third trial, that one was different. The jury came back with a verdict, not guilty, a full acquittal. And then the jury did something that almost never happens. They didn't just say he was not guilty. They actually wrote a formal public apology to him. They said, "We feel that a great injustice has been done him and that Roscoe Arbuckle is entirely innocent and free from all blame." Talk about a complete and total legal vindication. But here's the crazy part. It didn't matter. The verdict in the courtroom was innocent. But the consequence in the real world? He was blacklisted. It was a professional death sentence. The damage was already done. You see, in the court of public opinion, he'd been found guilty from day one. So, this is where the story gets bigger than just one man. The fallout across the entire industry was just massive. A wave of panic swept through the movie studios, and what they did next was going to change how movies were made for the next 40 years. You have to understand, the studio bosses were absolutely terrified. They saw this massive public outrage, and they thought, uh-oh, if we don't clean up our act, the government is going to step in and do it for us, and that could destroy their entire business. So what was their solution? Let's censor ourselves before they get the chance.
And that thinking led directly to something called the Motion Picture Production Code. You probably heard of it as the Hays Code, named after this guy, Will Hays, who they brought in to be Hollywood's moral watchdog, basically. And for decades, this code laid down the law on exactly what you could, and more importantly, what you couldn't show on a movie screen.
And these rules weren't vague either, they were super specific. Things like a priest or minister could never be the bad guy or even a funny character. The American flag always had to be treated with respect. You couldn't show the details of a crime. Seduction, well, that could be hinted at, but it absolutely had to be punished by the end of the movie. And miscegenation, that is, interracial relationships, was completely forbidden. Basically, all that wild, experimental, sometimes edgy stuff you saw in early movies, yeah, that was over.
So, while Hollywood was busy building this new moral wall around itself, what about the guy who started it all? Well, this whole thing brings us back to Roscoe Arbuckle, who was at the same time being systematically erased from the picture. Think about this. A court of law declared him innocent, but his films were still banned. He was blacklisted, couldn't get a job as an actor anywhere. The only way he could work was to direct movies using a fake name, William Goodrich. He basically became a ghost, working in the shadows of the very industry that he helped create.
And this timeline of his last few years is just tragic. So he's blacklisted in 22, he spends years directing under a pseudonym, then finally, in 1933, it looks like things are turning around. Warner Brothers signs him to a new contract to star in feature films again, a comeback. He celebrated that night, supposedly telling friends it was the best day of his life. And then he went to sleep and never woke up. He died that very night, at just 46 years old. The comeback was over before it even began.
So it all leaves you with this one big question, doesn't it? The Fatty Arbuckle scandal wasn't just about one man's career being destroyed. It was the moment an entire industry panicked, lost its nerve, and slapped decades of censorship on itself. It really makes you wonder, what kind of stories were never told? What kind of movies did we miss out on, all because of one party back in 1921?